So I'm going to talk about market failure very briefly. And the big question is, of course, how much government intervention should there be? And then the question is, when will the market work and when will the market not work? In order to discuss this, I want to mention three things. First of all, I want to discuss the meaning of market failure. What does it mean when we say that the market fails? So the meaning. The second thing I want to discuss is the causes of market failure. And then I want to discuss some of the examples we have. So these are the three things I want to cover. So first of all, what is market failure? What do we mean when we say the market fails? I think we have to distinguish between two different things. First of all, a technical sense, and then the second, a moral sense. So in a technical sense, the market will fail because it's not efficient. It doesn't produce the best price and the best quantity. But that's very different from a moral failure when we say the distribution is bad. So a society could be very efficient, but still very unequal. So we have to distinguish between those two things. And usually when we talk about market failure, we're talking about market failure in a technical sense, not in a moral sense. But it's perfectly acceptable, of course, to say that the market fails in a different sense, so we need to do something. But usually when we talk about market failure, we focus on this. And that's very different from a moral thing, so we have to distinguish between those two things. So what are some of the causes? Let's mention four main causes. First of all, the market could fail because there's imperfect competition. Imperfect competition. And one example of that would be a monopoly. So for example, physicians, they're licensed and they basically have a monopoly of providing some kind of services. And then you have lots of different kinds of monopolies. And the big problem then is they can charge high prices, and that's bad. That creates a technical failure in the market. You want competition. You want lots of firms competing to produce the lowest price. So the second cause of market failure would be externalities. And externalities is just a fancy word for when the price does not reflect the true social cost or social benefits of something. So when the cost is too high, then we consume not enough. If the cost is too low, then we consume too much. So externalities. And we should distinguish then, of course, between the positive and the negative externalities. An example of a positive externality would be vaccination. So when you consider whether you should get vaccinated or not, then you only consider the benefits for yourself. But of course it does have wider benefits. So if you only consider the benefits for yourself, the price will probably be too high compared to what it should be, because there are social benefits that are not included. But then you have negative externalities like pollution. So if a firm doesn't have to pay for pollution, and some people will be harmed by that pollution, then they will produce too much and the price will be too low because the price does not reflect the cost of the pollution. So that's market failure if you have externalities. Third, public goods. If you have public goods, you will have market failure. Why? Because public goods are that's a good with a special nature. It's a good that you cannot prevent other people from consuming once you have produced it, which means that the market will not produce it because they can't make it profitable. One example of that is TV signals. Because once you produce TV signals, everyone can receive those signals. Now, of course, you can solve that problem by scrambling the signals and having it coded. And you can also solve the problem by bundling the good. So you have advertisements, for example. So it is possible to solve some of this problem. An example from the healthcare sector would be knowledge and research. Once you produce some kind of knowledge, for example, a pharmaceutical, then basically people could copy it unless you have laws against that. So research and development and the knowledge produced could be considered a public good. And the market itself will not be very good at producing that unless you have laws protecting that research, of course. Now, the fourth reason why we have market failure sometimes is imperfect information. Imperfect information. And an example of that is supplier-induced demand. For example, if you go to the dentist and the dentist tells you, oh, you need to do this and this, and then you just say yes because the dentist knows more than you about what to do. So the dentist could actually exploit this, and if the dentist is a profit maximizer, he will say, oh, you need to do this, and he will earn a lot of money, and you will have to pay that. And the reason he can do that is because there's asymmetric information. The dentist knows more than you. And it's also possible that it goes the opposite direction, that you know more than someone else and you can exploit that. And then the market will not be perfect. The solution will not be the best solution possible. So supplier-induced demand is one example. Supplier-induced demand, that's when they will exploit the knowledge to increase their demand for their own product. Supplier-induced demand. But there are lots of problems with imperfect information in health insurance markets, for example. And we're going to go through that in more detail later on. So we have some things called a moral hazard, which is when people take high risk because they have insurance, or adverse selection, which is when you get the bad customers because they're the only ones who will be attracted to your product. So these will create problems for the market. But then you have solutions, of course. But you need to know the four main causes of market failure, and you need to know that these four things will create technical problems for the market. But in addition to that, you have moral problems. That's it. Thanks.